Did anybody see or hear of the president himself doing anything inappropriate as it related to Jeffrey Epstein?
I was even taken on a trip to Africa with former President Bill Clinton and other notable figures.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Behavioral Arts. My name is Spidey, and I use my degree in sociology and psychology, my certifications in criminal interrogation and body language analysis, and over 10 years' experience as an award-winning mentalist to teach people behavioral analysis and practical psychology on stages and television shows all over the world. Last week, NBC News hosted a panel interview with Epstein survivors and family members of Epstein survivors to tell their stories and share their opinions on the DOJ's investigation and report involving the Epstein files. But what do their body language, facial expressions, and word choice reveal? And can this panel provide an Epstein client list despite what the DOJ reported? Let's dive right in.
I want to first get to Skye and Amanda and Danny, who are here representing your sister, Virginia Giuffre. Danny, Skye, what message does it send to be here with this group in this, what, as Liz described, this almost show of strength?
She should be here. I am so honored to be here with you guys. She would be here. She'd be screaming, you know. And I think, you know, they said it best. It's like, if I could really say what we're looking for out of this is justice, looking for accountability. And I think it's, we really have to start questioning, what do we stand for? So, it means the world to be here with you, all of you. And, I think this is only the beginning of what's really to come, because showing a force like this, they have to listen now.
Okay, so the goal of this analysis is going to be to look at the nonverbal and verbal communication to try to figure out two things. The first is, does this group of survivors have some information about the Epstein list? Do they know about any celebrities that were involved with Epstein? And second, what is the goal of this interview, of this special? What are they trying to do? And a lot of the questions and the direction that the conversation takes answers that question for me. So right here, we are looking at the family of Virginia Giuffre, who was an Epstein survivor and unfortunately took her own life. And they've spoken up about her numerous times. And right here, when the question is being asked, the camera cuts over to them. And in the front, we see one of the brothers, Daniel. And if you look at his face, there's sadness written all over it. We could see the corners of the mouth are downturned. There's a lot of droopiness in the face, around the eyes, the musculature of the mouth. Even in the body language, he's sitting pretty small in that chair. Arms are close to the body, hands are on his thighs. So everything is closed in, everything is downwards. One of the things that I look for in day-to-day life, in social interactions, in news stories like this, is sadness being felt or displayed? And I usually have a gauge in my head to try to see where the person lands. And if we look at Daniel here, there's almost nothing here that's this big display. He's not trying to make a show of it, but we do see in the nonverbal communication that he's experiencing sadness. Now, when it comes to his brother, Skye, there's a couple of very interesting notes. Let's go through what we see in the emotion. If we look at his body language overall, you'll notice he's a little hunched over in his chair. His arms are very close to his body, which is something we very often see when someone's feeling defensive or vulnerable. And his fingers are interlocked together, and we're seeing these little self-soothing gestures that in the research we call adapters, manipulators, pacifiers. And these are usually done to reduce stress or anxiety. You'll notice that the moment the emotion hits, he does what we normally do when sadness hits, which is turn away or hide it. So sadness is a weakness. Subconsciously, we know that it exposes a vulnerability, and in the way that we evolved, we built the reflex to hide it, which is why very often in a public setting, when you see someone speaking and sadness hits, they instantly turn away. Head down, head away. You might even get a finger up like this as they ask for a moment. These are all very common things when sadness hits. In his case, we see him look down immediately, then he looks up, and then he comes down and he begins to speak. So these are all very natural things with sadness. Another thing that's very natural and a little more subtle here is if you look at his eyebrows, there are a couple of moments where those inner corners just come together and raise up a little. You see it in the muscles on the forehead a little bit over here. You see it when he raises his head. You see it when he comes down and turns over to his left and begins to speak. It's not a big, obvious eyebrow motion. It's just a little bit those inner corners of the eyebrows coming together and upwards. This is something that happens universally, everywhere in the world when we experience sadness. And it's very difficult to fake. It's difficult to get just those inner corners of the eyebrows to move and go up without the whole eyebrow raising. So we're seeing little bursts of that. And finally, the other thing that we're seeing is although he gets choked up, as he's talking, he moves away from it pretty quickly. I wouldn't say instantly, it doesn't go away instantly, but as he's talking, eventually he goes to a place where he's just normally talking. So he's not holding on to this sad cadence of speaking as a way to let everyone know, look how sad I am, I can't even get my words together. It goes away pretty quick. So all those things are happening that are very natural and normal with sadness, but there are a few things that, again, if we look at this scale of like feeling sadness and showing sadness, it's not 100% on this extreme. It's close to it, but there's some things that push it a little bit more in this direction. And they happen around the time where his head is up like this. So the head is up here, and we're hearing a lot of these sounds here associated with sadness, like, the sniffing. And of course, it's very possible that he's doing that because he has to clear his nose before he speaks. But we're hearing quite a bit there. And he goes, oh, sorry, as he leans forward like this before he speaks. So in this one little moment, it seems like there's a little bit of showing sadness as opposed to feeling sadness. And I want you to compare this to another time that he spoke last week during a press conference. Again, when the subject came up of his sister, notice what happened in that situation.
With the privilege of speaking today on behalf of Virginia, Robert Jeffrey, as her family. We are here today because we support H.Res.581, the Epstein Files Transparency Act.
So see, in that case, it's pretty much 100% feeling an emotion versus showing an emotion. He deals with it really, really quickly. The emotion hits. I mean, it's always going to hit. This is his sister. If something even close to this happened to my sister, for the rest of my life, anytime the thought of her came up, I would be a mess. So of course the emotion's going to hit. There's no right or wrong way for the emotion to hit. The question is after that. What comes after the emotion? In the press conference, he immediately, we see the tightening of the lips. He's holding something in. We see the eyebrows do some stuff there. The eyebrows of sadness for a quick second, but he deals with it. And when he speaks, seconds into him speaking, it's gone. Traces of the sadness are gone. So that's typically the way it looks like when you just feel it. It hits, you deal with it, and then you go, unless it continues to make you sad. So when I saw the difference between those two, and a couple of questions that we're about to see in the NBC interview, it gave me the impression that one of the main goals of the NBC interview is to pull emotion out of these survivors. And we're gonna see some very good examples of how they try to do that in the rest of the interview. I've been on a lot of sets of news shows like this, whether it was because I was making an appearance or consulting for someone else. And it's very interesting how producers often have a way to get emotion out of people. Even if it's in the prep, before something that's very subtle, where they go, America's gonna be listening, this is really important, and they pull that emotion out of you for the camera, they have really interesting ways to go about it. And when I saw those moments here, it's telling me that a big focus here is to get emotions out, to get the viewers emotional about this information, even if we're not gonna get a whole bunch of new information. But let's keep going to see what kind of information we are going to get. Now, I want you to notice what happens with Sky immediately as he's answering his question. He turns the attention to the rest of the group and puts a lot of the focus on them. He talks about how glad he is that they're all there together. He says how honored he is to be there with all of them, and that showing a force like this, now they have to listen. So immediately we're seeing here that there's genuine emotion, there's a little bit of a plea to the camera, and then he's immediately focusing to this group coming together. And what that's letting me know is that I don't think that he or his brother have a whole lot of information to give about this. They're hoping that the group does. They're hoping that this group together can get answers out there, but I don't think that we're gonna get answers or names or that much information out of him. He wants them as much as we do.
You have never before spoken publicly about your experience.
Correct.
I'm going to ask you to share some of your experience now. What were your interactions with Jeffrey Epstein? What can you tell us?
My interactions, if you guys have followed or know Jenna's story, Jenna is one of my best friends from middle school, I would say. And it's pretty much the same story in that aspect.
How old were you?
I was 14.
And where were you? This was in Florida?
Yes.
And did you go to the home in Palm Beach? Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yes, I went to the home in Palm Beach.
Okay. And what were you involved in there? What did he ask you to do?
I'm not really comfortable answering that.
Okay.
It's the same as if you follow the story, you know what I was asked to do.
It sounds like you almost buried Jeffrey Epstein's memory, his name.
Absolutely.
And then all of a sudden, all these years later, here it comes, back into the public spotlight again. What was that like for you?
It's so I had never really thought about it, I guess, because I just put it behind. You didn't talk about it, didn't think about it, nothing. And it was kind of like, okay, now you have to heal from this. Now you have to address it and face it.
It's almost like you're in denial, maybe?
No, I just, at that point, like I'm 30, I had moved on. I had a career, you know, a family. And now it's like, okay, well, it's the truth and it's my truth, so.
Okay, so that is Wendy Avis, and this was the first time that she was making a public statement about her experience. And there is something that happened there that aggravated me so much. Before we talk about that, let's look at a little bit what's going on with her behaviors. First, you'll notice that she has a very direct way of answering questions. She's not trying to tell a big story. She's not elaborating. You know, she was asked how old she was. I was 14. And then the interviewer said, you know, did you go to the house in Palm Beach? Tell me more about that. And she just goes, yeah, I went to the house in Palm Beach. She doesn't elaborate on that the way the reporter was hoping to get a juicy story here, some kind of headline. There's a moment in body language I really want to focus on because we see something that's very often misinterpreted, but once you understand it, it makes so much sense in this context. And it's when she's asked to tell her story, and as she's telling it, she says that it's pretty much the same story, and we see this no shaking of the head.
It's pretty much the same story in that aspect.
Now, this no gesture is one of the most misinterpreted gestures in all of body language. I very often see all over social media, in comments, and even articles sometimes, people saying that one of the things you could look for to know if someone's being deceptive is when their head goes like this. First of all, there isn't a single gesture that can allow you to know when someone's being deceptive, least of all, nose with the head. We very often use these for all kinds of different things, sometimes even for emphasis, like I just did there, sometimes even for emphasis. Now, if you see these little jittery nose like this as part of a cluster, other things are going on that are red flags, maybe it can be an indication that there's some kind of inner conflict. But in this case, it's matching her speaking, and it's as she's saying that, it's pretty much the same story, and she's going no like this. So in this case, it's very likely that she's simply thinking, you know, there's nothing different from the other stories. It's pretty much the same story, nothing to add there. And the reason I really believe that that's exactly what we're seeing is because seconds later, as she keeps talking, as she says in that aspect, we see a quick shrug like this with the shoulders. And there's a lot of research on shrugging, and sometimes it involves the shoulders, sometimes the hands, sometimes the head, mouth, eyebrows, or any combination of these. But whenever you see a shrug in a social situation, it denotes a lack of something. I don't something. So in this case, it's simply, I don't have anything to add. It's the same story as everyone else. So it makes a lot of sense to see that gesture with that shrug. What happens next from a behavioral or interview standpoint is so aggravating to me. I get that there are different intentions to different interviews. Like when I interview, I'm trying to get information out of someone. In this case, maybe they're trying to get emotion out of someone. But man, is it something that I find very aggravating. So she is talking about how she left it in the past, right? She got away from it. She never thought of Jeffrey Epstein again. Her family moved away. She just put in her past, right? And we could see as she's telling the story that there's a detachment there. She doesn't really want to be talking about it. She's saying, you know, I don't really want to comment on it. She doesn't want to revisit the memory. And then this interviewer says, it's almost like you're in denial, maybe. And that is something you never say to a survivor of trauma. I know that we have a lot of therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists who watch the channel, and I'm sure, let me know in the comments, but I'm sure that a lot of you, when you heard that, you're like, oh my God, please don't ever say that again. Because that's a suggestion. In our line of work, that's called a suggestion.
It's almost like you're in denial, maybe?
No, I just, at that point, like
If somebody is not in denial, right? They actually moved on. They're actually doing better. But you say, it seems like you're in denial. What that does to the brain is it makes it go, wait a second, am I in denial? What am I denying? Have I not dealt with it properly? And those emotions could surface as a result of the suggestion. For example, I could say, don't think of a purple elephant. 100% of us right now are thinking of a purple elephant. The reason is the moment the brain hears that, it has to process what that word means, and sometimes as a result, it pulls that image or that emotion up. So just by saying, you might be in denial, you could cause the person to experience certain emotions that they would have dealt with perfectly fine without you saying that. Look, I understand that there are certain things that I've studied and that I can look at and I know the cause they can have, and I'm really hoping, I'm very much hoping and giving the benefit of the doubt that the reporter did not know that she was doing this. That you're not supposed to tell someone the mental state that they're in because you could cause that mental state. It's literally called a suggestion in psychology. I'm hoping she didn't know that, because we're about to see Wendy kind of break down in a way that I wouldn't have expected listening to the beginning of her answer. And it could very well be because it's being poked at in a way that she wasn't ready to address it. She just wanted to come and tell her side of the story and just be here to support the rest of them, and some emotions about to come out.
I think that, like she said, power in numbers, even if I'm just counted as statistically in numbers as another victim, that's enough for me. And I want to support her. She's been doing all this for years alone, and she doesn't deserve to do it alone.
And I know that that's emotional for you. I can see it in you.
And it's also emotional. You know, I haven't met them today, but going through stuff like this, especially as an adult, it brings up a lot of mental health issues. And I've thought of hurting myself, and not now, but, you know, over the last 6 or so years, just going through all this.
And so there it is. We literally see that Wendy is saying that she's there just to be, you know, another number. Like, this happened to her as well, so she's there to represent the group, and she's there to support her friend as well. So she's literally talking about how she dealt with this, but she's just here to support this group, for the truth to come out on this story. And she gets a little choked up. It's not that obvious. It's not this big thing. We just see that, you know, she's slowing down a little bit in that speech, and the reporter immediately jumps on that and goes, and I know that's emotional for you. I can see it. Right? So we're seeing right here in these little moments that the reporter and the production are trying to pull those emotions out because it's a better headline for them. You know, it's a better clip for social media. So, and it works because Wendy actually breaks down at this point. And I don't know if she would have if the question was simply, tell us your story and then we move on. So I don't think this line of questioning is helpful. And I really do hope that if Wendy is re-experiencing certain things because this story is resurfacing, that she's getting the right kind of help to deal with those emotions and to be able to go back to a place, like she said earlier, where she had left it in her past and had dealt with it in a positive way for her. But I don't think that this interview and some of these questions were very healthy for her. Okay, now we're gonna look at some more specific questions about what they saw or who they saw when they were around these activities and what their answers suggest about how much information they have. But before we do me a huge favor, hit that subscribe button, turn the notifications on for more behavioral analysis and practical psychology content, and also take a quick second to like this video because it really does help with the growth of the channel.
And Lisa, to you, as somebody who attended Ghislaine Maxwell's trial, or at least parts of it.
Yes, I did.
The interview, the release of that audio, the prison transfer. What did you make of all that as it was happening over the course of the summer?
I was just disgusted by it. It just, like she said, she was an abuser. There was one point when Jeffrey had called me to go meet with her after I had met her at a function, at a charity event. I mean, thank God I didn't go. But just the climate in New York at that time, everybody knew that she was working with him or had something that wasn't right with her. And so much has come out since then that we know, you know, her great involvement. I mean, some even say that she was the one that was the mastermind of a lot of it. I'm not sure about that, but regardless, she is the abuser, and why are we so concerned with how she feels about things and her opinions about Trump or anybody else? She's a convicted felon, and so we need to move on from, you know, highlighting her as someone that we should be listening to.
So what would you say to the Department of Justice as they were pursuing these conversations with her?
They have emails, they have flight logs, they have a list they've compiled, right? And I feel like if they're not going to release this list to the public that everybody wants to see, we want to know who it is. A lot of us survivors know. We've been compiling lists of our own, and we have so many other survivors. Please come forward, and we'll compile our own list and seek justice for, on our own. I mean, I think that's what's going to happen next.
Okay, so the woman speaking is Lisa Phillips, and there's been a lot of focus on her on social media and a lot of the comments of these clips, because during the press conference, when she was talking, or even when she was standing behind the person who was talking, there was a lot of smiles coming out of her, and there was a lot of something that looked more casual or relaxed than serious in tone. Now, the first thing that's important to note is that there isn't really a right way to deal with trauma. All kinds of people deal with it in all kinds of ways. And Lisa specifically is in a very interesting predicament because she hosts a podcast. It's called From Now On, where she took her life story, turned it into a podcast. She interviews other people who had similar experiences, so she's used to talking about this quite a bit. The reason I say that creates an interesting situation is because when she goes on these interviews, whether it's the one with NBC or the press conference, she has a difficult choice to make. If she leans into emotion and makes it this big emotional thing to try to get emotion out of people, it won't seem authentic because she's used to talking about this. She's probably a lot more desensitized than a lot of other people because it's often something that she discusses. So it wouldn't make sense for all of a sudden to get all emotional about it, and it wouldn't seem legit. So I think the best move for her is to take the topic seriously, but to not give into emotions that she's not actually experiencing. Because I think the best anyone can do is to be genuine at all times when you're trying to tell a story. So this is the position that she's in. And we're seeing hints of that even here, right? Right in the beginning, when she's asked about what she feels about the Ghislaine Maxwell interview, and she said that she was disgusted by it, we're seeing a very slight hint of disgust, but it's almost masked behind a smile. So disgust is universal. We see it the same everywhere in the world, and it's very easy to understand why it happens. Evolutionarily speaking, it's that we shut everything down because we want less input, right? If something's disgusting, a bad taste, a bad smell, we don't want to experience any more of it. We don't want to see it. So we close the eyes like this, we turn away from it, we crinkle the nose because we don't want to smell it, and we close the mouth. And disgust looks like this everywhere in the world. When she says that she was disgusted by it, there are slight hints of that. There's a micro expression of disgust where we see the nose crinkle just a little bit and the eyes, the bottom eyelids just kind of squint up a little. But the face is in a neutral position and the mouth is even smiling a little bit. It's nowhere near a genuine smile. If you showed this, whether it's a picture or a video, to anyone in my line of work, not one of them would tell you, oh, there's a genuine full face smile at all. But the mouth is smiling and this disgust is kind of muted in the background of this social moment. Now, just a little bit later, as she talks about Ghislaine and says she is the abuser, we see another facial expression that's universal, and this one is dead on, and it's very obvious, and it's the expression of contempt. As she's saying she is the abuser, we see the right side of the mouth go up like this, causing a line on one side of the nose. So contempt is a universal expression. Research has shown that it looks pretty much the same everywhere in the world and has very high recognizability. And it's typically identified by a scrunching on one side of the face that either looks like this, or with the mouth open like that, because she was speaking as she said it. It often is combined with this side eye like this, which we call looking askance, even rolling the eyes like this. But basically, anytime we look down on someone or morally judge someone or something, it's very common to see that kind of one-sided scrunch. So we saw it perfectly right there as she was talking about Ghislaine. So the contempt is there, a little bit of disgust is there as well. It's not being overplayed, it's not being displayed. And then she goes on to talk about a list that the survivors themselves are compiling, which is really interesting until we pay attention to the specific words and look at the behaviors as she's talking about it. So first she puts the focus on the DOJ and that, they have the files, they've looked into this, they have the list and they should release it because people want to know. People want to know who it is, who's on that list. And that kind of suggests that there might be some information there that she doesn't know or doesn't have access to. Because otherwise she would go, DOJ could do whatever they want. We have the list. We're about to release the list. So this big focus on the DOJ's information shows that that information is even important to her. We see more signs of this though, because she goes, if they don't release that, now her pitch goes really high as she turns over and looks at the rest of them and goes, a lot of the survivors could, and she stumbles on her words, a lot of the survivors could, no.
A lot of us survivors, no.
So usually when the words start to fall apart like that, especially for someone who speaks eloquently, it's a good indication that there's a lot of thought going on. The cognitive load is increased. Her pitch is also up. This is a good sign of stress. She's looking over to the rest of them as she's saying, it's like, right guys, we have some information. And she's checking in with them. And then immediately she goes, some of the survivors, and we've been compiling lists of our own. So not we've compiled, we don't have a list, we've been compiling. This is a work in progress. Then immediately after that, she says, and we have so many other survivors. So, we're compiling a list, but there's so many other out there. Again, indicating that this list may not be all that she's trying to represent because, there's more. There's obviously others out there. Please come forward. She instantly says, please come forward, signaling that they do need more information. So we've been compiling a list, but there's more out there. Please come forward. We need more.
We've been compiling lists of our own, and we have so many other survivors. Please come forward.
And then she ends with, we'll compile our own list. So we went from we've been compiling a list to we will compile a list. Like this is something we are going to do.
And we'll compile our own list.
And I feel like when you just on the surface look at what she's saying, it sounds like she's saying the DOJ have names, but we have names too, and we've got a list. But when you really look at the details of it, it sounds more like she's saying, they've got a list, we want that list, and if you don't release it, well, we're gonna work on something too. And there's other people out there, I really hope they join us here because, we're working on it. We might put together some kind of list. I also want you to take a quick look at her statement during the press conference.
I would like to announce here today, us Epstein survivors have been discussing creating our own list. We know the names. Many of us were abused by them. Now together as survivors, we will confidentially compile the names we all know who were regularly in the Epstein world. And it will be done by survivors and for survivors. No one else is involved.
So first of all, I don't know when each of these interviews was conducted in respect to one another. They were released very close to each other, so I can't really know which one was filmed first. But in this press conference, she's saying that the survivors are discussing creating our own list. Whereas in the interview, she said, we've been compiling. So one suggests that it's been happening, whereas here it suggests that, well, we've just been talking about starting to do that. However, in the press conference, she does say, we know the names. Many of us were abused by them. And she speaks a lot in we, whether it's in the press conference and in the interview, because I think that there's more information in the group than from her specifically. That's the vibe that I get because it's very often that this information is coming from a collective. And I think she puts a lot of faith or importance in the information of that collective, and this is why she wants more. But in the press conference, she very specifically says that we know the names. Many of us were abused by them. So that's a really interesting piece of information that she wasn't that concrete on with NBC. And if that's true, well, yeah, they should totally compile that list and that list should be released. I'm excited to see where that goes. The one thing that's really interesting about Lisa that I want to point out is that I have no doubt that she's very good at her job as a podcaster because she thinks in headlines. And we see that in the way that she speaks. She almost speaks in headlines. There are numerous cases in the NBC interview where she says something that pulls you right in and you go, oh my God, okay, well, yeah, okay, and then she follows it up with something and you go, oh, okay, never mind. There's a point where she's talking about Guylaine and she goes, Jeffrey called me to go meet with her. So we go, okay, wow, okay, she met with Guylaine. What happened? What are we gonna get here? And she goes, thank God I didn't go.
There was one point when Jeffrey had called me to go meet with her after I had met her at a function, at a charity event. I mean, thank God I didn't go, but.
So it's like she pulls you in with that hook, like, oh, there's this interesting meeting that's happening, but no, the meeting didn't happen, I didn't go. Shortly after that, she says that some people think that she's the mastermind. Guylaine's the mastermind. Again, like what a headline. Like, oh, the actual mastermind is Guylaine Maxwell. And then immediately falls up by saying, I'm not sure about that.
I mean, some even say that she was the one that was the mastermind of a lot of it. I'm not sure about that, but
And we already talked about it, but with the list, same thing, where she goes, well, we know names, we're working on a list. And you go, oh my God, they're working on a list. But then she goes towards, yeah, but we need, please come forward. If you have information, please come forward. And yeah, we'll work on our own list. So we lose that confidence a little. So again, it's like big headline. Jeffrey called me to meet Guylaine, but I didn't go. Big headline. Some people say she's the mastermind. I'm not so sure about that. Big headline. We're making a list, but we need more names. So all this indicates that she very effectively thinks in headlines, in big stories. And I see the mission, I see the excitement, but I think that if we take what she's saying at face value, some of the things might be a little oversold. I think she's very keen on discussing with the survivors and really queuing for more and getting that story out there. But I don't think that at this time, she personally has a whole lot of information. It doesn't seem like there's that much confidence behind the things she's saying about the information that she herself at this time could release.
With these questions around a pardon, did anybody see or hear of the president himself doing anything inappropriate as it related to Jeffrey Epstein?
No.
Or former President Clinton?
No.
Are you glad there is a renewed spotlight on this? Is there anything good that you could see coming from this? Or is this reopening these incredibly traumatic moments for you? Is it a mixed bag? I wonder how you feel about that.
Okay, so that segment aggravated me for a few reasons. First of all, it was the most important line of questioning that started, and then it was just abandoned. There's an awkward cut there, so I don't know if there's anything more that was said or if anything more was asked. But here's what I find really odd about this. She's saying, did any of you see or hear of the president doing anything inappropriate, in relation to Jeffrey Epstein? And then adds on to that, or former President Clinton, and they all say no, right? But in the press conference, there was a woman who spoke, a survivor who spoke. She's not in this panel. I don't know why she's not in this panel, but her name is Shante Davies, and she flat out said that she went on a trip and with Epstein, and President Clinton was there. And she also talked about how Epstein often bragged about his friendship with President Trump.
I was even taken on a trip to Africa with former President Bill Clinton and other notable figures. In those moments, I realized how powerless I was. The truth is, Epstein had a free pass. He bragged about his powerful friends, including our current president, Donald Trump. It was his biggest brag, actually.
So what I find really interesting is that these survivors are all close. At the press conference, they were all together. Lisa earlier said that they're compiling a list, so obviously they're sharing stories. And Shante, during that press conference, very blatantly said that, she didn't say anything illegal happened, but she did talk about a connection between the presidents and Jeffrey Epstein. So I wonder why in this case, when the question was asked, none of them said, because she said, have any of you heard of anything? I wonder why none of them said, look, I didn't see anything, but our friend Shante, who's not here, has told us that she went on a trip, Clinton was there, or that Epstein often bragged about, Trump. That didn't come up at all. It's almost like the connection doesn't exist and none of them are aware of it. I wonder if their lawyers had someone to say, don't say anything about that. Don't bring that up. You're looking at a lawsuit for defamation. I wonder what it is, and I wonder why the subject was shut down so fast when it's the most important line of questioning. I don't know if it's my reflex because I studied interrogation and I've done corporate interviews a lot, and the goal there is to try to get information. So I don't know if it's my reflex that's telling me you can't just abandon this line of questioning. But for me, the logical thing to do would be to spend quite a bit of time on that topic and say, okay, forget illegal. Did you ever see a connection between them two? Who else did he have a connection with? These are the questions people want. We spend all this time talking about other stuff, and here we are at the potential of trying to talk about a list or some affiliations, and it's just cut. I wonder if it's legal. Part of me thinks it has to be because this is the most important stuff to talk about. And then the interviewer does the same thing she did earlier, except for this time, instead of doing it to one person, she does it to the whole group, where she goes, are you glad that there's a spotlight back on this? Or, and here are the words she uses, is this reopening some incredibly traumatic moments for you?
Anything good that you could see coming from this? Or is this reopening these incredibly traumatic moments for you? Is it a mixed bag? I wonder how you feel about that.
Again, that's a suggestion. If any of them weren't doing that, if some of them were just glad that the spotlight was back on this and they're dealing with the emotion of it, by you going, is this reopening some incredibly traumatic moments for you? Just saying that to someone can start a chain of events that does cause that to happen. When you're talking to people who have dealt with something emotionally very heavy, open-ended questions are typically much safer because you let them come up with the answer, right? So you could simply ask, what are your feelings about this, coming back into the news cycle? Let them answer it. Are they happy about it? Is it re-traumatizing for them? But you can't give that suggestion. I really wish that these networks had someone who's experienced in working with trauma to kind of go through the questions and advise on things like this, because it may not be obvious, not everyone might see it, but I can promise you, having these emotionally loaded questions that suggest strong emotional reaction can cause reactions within people.
We haven't been protected up until this point. We haven't been protected and we haven't been informed. And it's an enormous burden to ask a survivor to name the names of their accusers when they don't feel like anything is going to be done about it, and when they know that doing so is going to only bring danger, potentially, to them and to the people that they love.
And there's another missed opportunity by this interview. The speaker is Liz Stein, and she's a bit of a challenge when it comes to body language analysis because her face on the right side doesn't move as much as her left side. And there are a lot of different things that can explain that. I'm not going to start listing them or speculate. Could be a bunch of things. All I know is that her left side's more animated than her right side, so it makes it hard to see certain things. But in her tone, we could definitely hear that there's anger. There's a very snappy, brisk tone when she's speaking. And even with her illustrators, with her head, there's a lot of these little brisker movements, right? So usually we think of comfort as a little bit more flowy like this when we speak with comfort, or even with happiness goes upwards. But with anger or frustration, we get a lot more of these little snappy things that we're seeing. So she's frustrated, and she says something that's a valid point. When a survivor feels like a story isn't being taken seriously, it's scary for them to come out and start naming names, and that if they come out and give names, it pretty much paints a target on their back and nothing gets done. So it's hard for people to come out. Now, the moment I heard that as an interviewer, I would wonder, because she could possibly be saying one of two things. Either she's speaking about herself and people that she knows, like, we don't want to give names because we're scared, or she's talking about more people out there coming out and revealing that they have some information, and they're scared to do that because it might paint a target on their back. It's not quite clear who she's talking about. This would have been a great opportunity for the interviewer to say, okay, if you felt that it was safe to give names and work with the DOJ, would you have names to give? Liz, would you have names to give? Who else here would have names to give? That's how we get to the bottom of something, right? Otherwise, we're getting a lot of ambiguous statements about we can make our own list, and some survivors, ambiguous survivors, are scared to give names. Who are these survivors? Do you know them? Do you have a list? Do you have names? Would you be able to make a list right now? So look, in conclusion, I feel like a lot of the clips that we just looked at and much more with this interview tells us that the goal of this interview from NBC was to make headlines. We interviewed some survivors. Some of them are coming out for the first time, but it wasn't really about information. It didn't move information forward. By the end of it, we're exactly where we were when the interview began. Furthermore, there were some missed opportunities around very important topics to try to see if we get a little bit more information, or even have an idea if there's information there to get, but those questions were kind of abandoned and went off in a different direction. And whenever there was the topic of information coming up, it felt like the confidence dropped, and they were very much relying on the information of the group. And I didn't at any point feel like one of these individuals definitely has a list of names or list of people that they themselves witnessed. I feel like a lot of them are on this mission and they're hoping that together they're gonna be able to figure it out. But I don't believe that there is this big information that they have that's gonna be a complete game changer. Maybe there's a little bit of something that they know, like the start of something, but I don't think there's this big aha piece of information. But let me know in the comments what you think. I'll leave a link in the description to the whole interview. Check it out, look at these clips again, look at the behaviors, and let me know if you think, is there one of these individuals that has some valuable information that can actually start putting a list together? Or do you feel like this was more about getting the viewers emotional and worked up, but the information just isn't quite there? Let me know in the comments what you think, and I will see you on the next one.